Everybody, welcome to the Rosie Murphy channel. I know it's been a long time, but the events on the world stage unfold slowly, and I don't ever feel the need to come on and force topics and force issues and force discussions when things do unwind very slowly, as we have here going on in the world now, with a lot of events in the world that are very disconcerting to us. But today I want to take a more philosophical bend as we discuss something that I've talked about a few times and hinted at a few times on my main channel, the Rosie O'Kelly channel, in some of my live streams. And I try to keep things light and pretty happy for the most part, but some subjects are very serious. And one of them that I want to discuss today is something called the perils of prosperity, and also the way that people tend to think along a line. The second one is easier to talk about. It's what we call linear thinking. In the United States, we're not alone in this. All through human history, people tend to think of what they see in the world today is what will be forever. In other words, if we're poor today, we're probably going to be poor in 100 years. We're probably going to be poor in 1,000 years. In the aggregate, yeah, individual people succeed. If we live in a wealthy nation, we tend to think that our prosperity will be here in 100 years, 1,000 years, or whatever. But history teaches us that prosperity comes and goes. And it usually comes through very hard work, okay? A lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and a real basing of a cash society where everything is cash and carry, you know, no credit. You become you have an extremely strong base upon which to build a future as savings build up in banks and other institutions. Eventually it reaches a point where there's enough money to do investments to create more wealth. Not because anybody planned it, but because individuals went out there, took the initiative and take the chances, and the whole country, society begins to be lifted up. The other side of the coin is mistakenly believing that prosperity is a inborn right of a nation. In other words, it's God's blessings will be with us forever for the next 100, 200 years, really leads to some bad decisions being made. And a lot of times, the standard of living of people within those countries can and the expectations for the future can kind of outrun the realities of what it takes to produce that. And this is in the situation that we find ourselves in the United States and a lot of countries today, is that there was a boom, great wealth production after World War II, particularly in the United States, because it still had the infrastructure which was not damaged by war. It was new. The mechanical, the educational, the engineering know-how, the business know-how, all those forces combined to a lesser extent in other nations to allow us to have a tremendous prosperity after World War II. Yeah, there were some bouts of inflation and things like that, but by and large, things were pretty controlled. Things were still on pretty much of a cash and carry basis. If the government had ideas about doing projects or doing works or things, well, they didn't really think about that too much because it still wasn't really the government's job to produce prosperity, to make the nation prosperous. It's still up to the individual people to do that. So things came very slowly. Government intervention in lives became very slow, and intervention in the way that things run became very slow. There was no government in the housing market except for veterans. There was just the early days of Social Security, no real unemployment insurance. Okay, people pretty much fended for themselves. But we know after the Great Depression, all of that began to change. With the success of the post-war period in the United States and to some extent other countries, wealth was generated, standards of living were raised dramatically. We know those golden age of the 50s, the fabulous 50s and the 60s in America, where everything was blue skies and sailing along. Well, guess what happens in those kind of eras? People come along, the social engineers, A lot of times the people that are disgruntled and feel that they can't pedal and keep up with the flow of being productive in society, producing, start to question the very roots of why do we need to work for the man? Why do we need to be productive? I should be able to sit under the shade of a fig tree and just read poetry every day and enjoy my life. Why do I need to work? Let the next guy take care of it. You couple that kind of attitude about apparent wealth creation and things like that, and people start to get the idea that work and productivity becomes optional. Something that you don't have to do, because somebody else will take care of it. And here's where the other side of the coin comes in. When the social engineers look at this prosperity, the deep thinkers, and most of them tend to be haters of capitalism and things like that, they tend to think that governments should have a better idea of how things should be distributed to the citizenry, the goods and service, even though history teaches us over thousands of years that the free market is truly the most efficient mechanism for the distribution of the best standard of living possible for as many people at that point in time. But the social engineers are undeterred because they think to themselves, you know what? Yeah, we shouldn't have a rat race. And there's people that are incapable of running that race. And more people are feeling dogged out because of the American dream is becoming hard to pursue. So we need to step in because we're so rich and our treasury is so overflowing with money, and everybody wants to be in the U.S. and invested, and we got money flowing in from everywhere. We're a safe haven. Hey, why don't we take advantage of this status and lift up those who can't or won't lift up themselves? We're not talking about people that are disabled. They truly need and should be supported in a civilized nation by the people within that nation. There's no question about that. But when people start to think that I don't have to climb the ladder of work, I don't have to climb out of my bed in the morning, things will be taken care of for me, then we've got some problems. Let's go back to the 1960s. Early 60s, late 50s, when the prosperity really became apparent in this country. 2 cars in a garage, right? Beautiful tract home, everybody happy, nice dog, 2 kids. The American dream, right? And people looked at that, some social engineers, and said, wow, we've got lots of people living in poverty, right? We don't examine why or whatever, although we're sociologists and other urban, they look at these things. The poor in Appalachian and other areas. And the last thing that they think of in those situations that any of the burden for uplifting should be on people within that area. Yes, some people escape poverty, but the government starts to get the idea, if we can just have a program to do this, to lift people up, to give them a better life. It's a noble thought, right? Then you have things, because of the tremendous wealth in this nation and people's feelings, and the social engineers try to harp on people's conscience, their idea of right and wrong. Okay, we'll have a great society. Under Lyndon Johnson, we'll undertake all these massive new programs of social welfare and social engineering because, you know what, we got the money, we can afford it. Don't worry about it. Right? We're going to be prosperous forever. When the government starts down that track of starting to do more for more groups and more individuals, well, what happens? The other people look around, people that aren't on the train, and say, you know what, I'm kind of marginalized too. Why isn't there something for me? Okay, we're going to get you cheaper housing. We'll get your student loans. We'll set up government backed student loans. There are a lot of programs. So instead of having the people with the most get up and go and the most drive and the most guts, the things that built this nation, people with get up and go that left foreign lands and came here and sweated and the toil of their brow to build a truly prosperous society. Now we see a case where that prosperity is used like a big pot that we can start dipping out of. Do this, and we have the defense to cover, and that costs a lot of money. Now we have to cover a lot of nations' defense. We have to put the safety umbrella, and then something else comes along. The cost of all this starts to reach beyond the current flow of tax dollars and receipts to the government. Now we reach a situation where we need to get more money. We need to get more taxes. Well, guess what? This is where you stumble in to one of the real weaknesses of democracy, and that's the need to get elected. Overshadows the need to be responsible. So rather than talk about raising taxes, which we knew has to be done to support this greater and greater endeavor to engender equality and success among all, can't do it. But what we can do, the hidden payer will be borrowing money. We'll just we'll borrow a little bit to cover it. We're rich. We'll cover. Don't worry. Don't worry, we're covered. We got it covered. And before you know it, one little dip at the borrowing well turns into buckets, turns into drilling rigs, turns into an ocean of borrowing. The perils of prosperity have reached a point where the prosperity did not cover the ability to fund grandiose adventures, social engineering projects, and other needs, military and other things. And now, more and more, because we need to get elected, we have to borrow money, therefore mortgaging our future to give the cover of prosperity. Well, okay, after a while it becomes expensive to manufacture here. Right? Cost of prosperity is made to everybody wants to have a good standard of living. But guess what? There's hungry people in other parts of the world. You may not like it, that are willing to work for 10 cents, 25 cents, 50 cents an hour. Factories, jobs start to migrate overseas because of the profit imperative. Right? Common. You want to survive, you got to get your costs down. And we saw that all through the 80s and 90s, resulting in the hollowing out of the economy. Yes, it'll come back to some extent, but certainly not in the massive waves that took it there overseas in the first place. The perils of prosperity. We create the seeds of our own future challenges and problems. Fast forward to today. And like any society that overspends, inflates their currency, inflates the cost of living for people, it becomes the tax that hits everybody. And everybody becomes miserable to some extent due to the rising cost of things that's not readily understood by the average person on the street, who in turn blame the politicians. So in turn, they borrow more, do more projects, do more. Where you see the vicious circle that's created. Lack of prosperity has no such outcome. Although when a country does become prosperous, it goes down the same road. So it's very hard to guard against the perils of prosperity. Thanks for watching, everybody. Your thumbs up are appreciated. I hope you sub up. Sub up also to the Rosie O'Kelly channel for daily fun. Ring the bell, set the bell up on all for all notifications, and thumbs up are appreciated. The perils of prosperity.